Well, welcome to another edition of Sleepy 8, our Métis podcast, residing out here in the Calgary Petroleum Club. I just want to point out there, for some of my mistakes from the last episode, really there's none, right, Devin? I think this is a perfect podcast. But
Oh
I
my
want
God,
to.
you're a politician.
Hey, you're not supposed to talk till I introduce you.
Okay.
So I want to introduce a very good friend of mine. He actually signed my oath of office when I first came in as president, and very happy to know him over the years. He was a former City of Calgary councillor, and very happy to be around Ward Sutherland. And I just want to introduce him too as one of our Transition Committee members for the Métis Nation of Alberta and this new self-government that we're creating. And we're very happy for him to be here because now we go from a nonprofit society to a sovereign nation government sort of having relationship with Canada. So very happy to talk about that today. So first of all, I want to maybe give us an insight on how you grew up, where, that type of thing, and sort of your Métis connection because you are a Métis. So
Excellent. Thanks, Lawrence. I appreciate it. Or Tanse. Yeah. So I'm Red River Métis. I was born in Selkirk. A lot of people, it's interesting when I'm in the neighborhood, I talk to anybody and they talk about Métis, they really don't understand what it means. And it's, the blend of two cultures. And of course, in the Red River area with me, they go, well, you're Scottish. How the heck can you be Métis? And a part of my clan was sent to the Red River area, and it was quite interesting in the documentation. The clan that was decided to be sent, the only reason was, and it was documented, is they drank less and they weren't lazy. So I'm hoping we're continuing that tradition of hard workers. But of course, we're in the Red River area, and then we married with the Cree. And like I said, I was born in Selkirk. So a very long line between the Inksters and Sinclairs and the Battle of Seven Oaks, etc. So moved out to Calgary about 30 years ago, and then more and more active in the Métis Nation, which is very proud in Alberta, and I think is very well organized. And I'm really proud to be part of the organization and now part of a self-government.
Yeah, so Sutherland is a Scottish Métis surname that we know about, versus mine is very French Métis. A lot of people assume that we're all French Métis, and no, we definitely crossed the line with English and Scottish and French, right? But Sutherland is a very Scottish name. Am I accurate in that?
Oh, yeah. We're actually from southern land in Scotland. So the tradition goes all the way back from, thousands of years ago. But what's is really interesting is when you're looking at our celebrations, it's a fiddle, which is very Scottish. Red River dance is a jig. Jigging is Scottish. And as we know, Bannock, a lot of people thought originally Bannock is Indian or, Aboriginal or Indigenous. It was actually a long time ago from Scotland. Bannock was around. So that's what makes Métis so special, because it's a combination of cultures where you kind of blend some of the traditions together, which makes it very unique.
So with all of that, you don't eat bannock because you're not into carbs. I noticed because we just had lunch.
Yes.
And I really should watch my carb load. But no, that I've heard actually all those stories that you told, and I think it's very well known about the bannock thing. But you must wear a tartan too. Is that part of it?
Yes, I have the Sutherland tartan, and I celebrate Robbie Burns and that. Good. And that's what I thought was so cool. It's just kind of like I celebrate both parts of our culture because we blended together.
Yeah, for sure. So I think what we want to maybe talk about today, because you're on the transition committee, what does transition mean in terms of the Métis Nation of Alberta's style of government now to where we'll be in the future?
Okay, great question. So let's just start with the Constitution itself, which was passed by the Métis members in Alberta. It was very challenging, I guess, when the commission was coming forward and saying, what would you like to see in the Constitution? Because many of the topics that came up that people were interested and wanted to see in the Constitution actually can't occur yet, and because they're laws. So it was a really interesting thing. It's almost like the chicken and the egg thing. Is like you have to be a government first to make the laws. You can't make the laws before you're a government. So what the Constitution is, it's basically a shell and a framework of what the government will be with principles behind it to support it. So during this process, there's going to have to be a transition. We're going to transition from a Society Act, as you said, to a self-government entity. And that can be very complicated in many different ways. Because of the different 6 regions, they're run very differently. The assets of which each region has is very different. Agreements that they have with current governments are very different. So the process and the responsibility of the transition committee is to go out to all the regions and work with those entities within the region to help with the transition. I think it's really important to note that the transition committee is not a political body. We are Switzerland. We are here to help with the transition, and there will be options as we go out into the regions of what the people want in their area, which is really, really important because the foundation of that Constitution actually puts all the, if you want to call it power or responsibility, at a local level and not centralized, which a lot of people didn't understand. And I mean, that's really when you take a look at the 2 main elected positions. There are 4, but the 2 main ones obviously is the citizen representative that will represent that district. People say, well, who are they? If the best way to describe it is they are the lawmakers within the government itself. Then there's the captain, which is the other elected position. And they're like the local representative, working with the local council and all the assets and everything, so they all have to work together. So we have the woman representative and also the youth. So all these kind of positions are going to have to work together congruently within the districts to make a lot of decisions and have the authority to make the decisions that they didn't have currently. So as we transition through all these different entities, it is a complicated process. Then we're talking about how do we transition to becoming a government? So for example, we have to have election rules of, for example, one of the main questions people ask, which is obvious if they want to run for these positions is, well, do I have to live in the district in order to run for it? So we're going to have to come up with these policies and guidelines and rules prior to the election. It's still, the goal is still the 3rd week of September to transition in. And it's only fair that well in advance that anybody that wants to run for any of these positions, they should know what the salary is and the benefits. They should know the responsibilities and expectations. They should know the rules of when they can run and how to fundraise and transparency and all those type of things. So as we look at all these different aspects, there are going to have to be some transitional laws and rules. And that was set out in the Constitution. There was actually a section for the Transition Committee to be authorized to take a look at what mandatory things are necessary in order to transition. Secondly is the transition won't stop once a new government comes in. It'll probably take another year past that. So the priority of the Transition Committee right now is to ensure that all the mandatory rules that are necessary to get to that point in September are completed. And as you know, on the provincial council, they'll be presented to you and you vote on it and whether or not you want these passed or not from the recommendations that the committee makes. Some of our different organizations right now, like Rupert's Land and Housing Division, everything, will become institutions. And how they operate and managed in terms of boards, et cetera, all that will have to be decided. So it's a very complicated process that's going to take obviously a while. There's so many subcategories, and I don't want to put people asleep by talking about them, but it's very technical. And the key message that I want to get out there is that we'll be out in the different regions shortly. And when we're out in the regions, we'll have a job description and a task that the transition committee is responsible for to give to the people out there, and start the discussions and give different options of how they want to approach transitioning.
Well, this is called Sleepy 8, so I don't know if it's suitable people falling asleep, but I didn't, of course. So what we're saying is that the election process is definitely a must, a primary before anything sort of happens, because we have to know what the constituencies will look like, the areas that we represent. We go from 15 elected officials to now 23 that's being proposed, right? So it's quite a large, big time push for these people to represent. But in decision making, like, can we maybe comment on that? Because I'm not too certain about that, what that'll look like later on for those 23.
Yeah, the decision-making process, like I said, will be at the local areas. So the best way to describe that, we'll get into the councils. Yeah. So on purpose, when you look at the booklet that was sent out to everybody on the Constitution, it showed on purpose the maps say that these are not part of the Constitution. Right. And that's really important, because depending on the level of participation, districts will change. That will be automatic. And you also have the option within a district to have or not have a council. And people are very confused about that. And why that option is there, again, depends on that particular district, of the level of people that are participating. It might not make sense. And maybe next year that district doesn't exist voluntarily. And that the lawmakers say, no, we'll eventually come out. I'm assuming that the Citizen Council, which is all the citizen representatives together, will, after elected, will at one point make a permanent district map and have permanent districts. So we wanted to make sure it was very fluid, depending on how people go. Now, in terms of responsibility, well, that'll really depend on your district and your population and what type of services you're going to be delivering. So every district will not get the same funding. The funding will be dependent on obviously what services you want to deliver, what's been decided, et cetera, as it's distributed throughout the new government. And that'll be the framework of, as citizen representative, to have those discussions. So here's a prime example. There's 2 districts in the city of Calgary. And right now, I think the border is 16th Avenue. Right. So some people have asked, well, if I live on the north side of the 16th Avenue, what does that mean? Can I vote for someone on the south side? Or how does this work? And if the north side is offering these services, but I live on the south, now what happens? Okay. So although we will have these districts, it doesn't mean the services to Métis Nation are separated. Right. So every district, for example, is supposed to right now have their own office. So we talked about that earlier, is that in Calgary, well, it only makes sense that district, your 1 and 2 should be sharing the same office. And maybe another district, 3, might be sharing the same office because all the services that you want to as a group provide, because the population is quite large. Yeah. And those services that are necessary maybe in an urban area that isn't in a more remote area is necessary. So those will all be worked out by the citizen representatives. So these type of things won't be pre-done by the transition committee, because as you form a council and decide what the needs are, then you'll decide at that level and have those conversations. But what really changes is, if you want to use the old scenario of, well, the head office decides everything and then it's pushed through and this is just what you get, that's not the new motto of the Constitution. Right. It's reverse. It's like what's required, and then in the pool of funding that the representatives are going to have to agree to that in that particular term. So it's a huge shift.
Yeah.
And it's what the people asked for.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting days, and I'm sure there'll be challenges. Now, one of the things that was asked for that really made sense was GPSing of the districts.
Yeah.
Because there was, you saw the maps and they weren't exact.
No.
That commitment to have that done, I think they're ready the end of this week, and they'll go out to the different presidents and everything for now. So it'll be ready for the election. And one great thing, by the way, of having the election recently, in terms of, I shouldn't say the election, I should say the Constitution vote, that the citizen data base is now accurate.
It's accurate, yeah.
So for the districts and the software that they purchased along with the elections really gives options for leaders in different districts to know exactly who's in their district and be able to communicate them effectively and know who they are, which is a big plus because, as you know, that was long overdue.
Yeah, it actually is. I mean, we get so many inquiries even to our office to say, well, do I qualify to live in there even though I don't live there? After 6 months, you really should change your address with the MNA too, just like everything else if you move, right? But a lot of people don't do that. So it's not a very accurate test. But we were getting notifications on our cell phones to go vote, right? So now we go there and then they supplant ourselves and then they know exactly where we live. So now we have a very accurate database.
Yeah, this is really going to help the new elected representatives to really get out there and know their people and effectively communicate all the different programs, and also to get feedback to see what's important to the people that you're representing. It's really a good game changer in terms of being more effective. Then there's simple things that you think about is the Métis card.
Yeah.
Well, that card has to change because once we're a government, you're no longer a member, you're a citizen.
Yeah, well, it says Métis Nation of Alberta too.
Yeah.
And our name is changing to Otipemisoak. Hopefully I'm saying it right. But the people who govern themselves, the people who own themselves, we hear these terms, right? But
yes. So we're left in a Otipemisoak. We're going to have to change our flag.
Yeah.
Our flag is going to have to change. The cards have to change. There will be much more, I think, I would assume there would be much more formality because you're a self-government in terms of when you're engaging with different levels of government, et cetera, because you're no longer a society act. And as you know, in the history of why we really wanted to move forward towards self-government, we always have, but we've outlived the Society Act and who we are and what we do.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when we're dealing with different levels of government, they're pushing back and saying, well, you're just an organization like a Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah.
You have no standing here.
Yeah.
And this will change everything. And it will give us standing and will give us the ability to move forward to do the right thing for the Métis people. But in doing so, we also have to have our protocol and decide what that is when we're dealing with different orders of government and also with other First Nations. One of the processes that the Transition Committee is also will be doing is engagement with other First Nations in Alberta and the provincial government, et cetera, and different organizations, where we'll be engaging them as a information session to bring them along in our process, to let them know and that we want to have relationships and let them know what's going on so they understand exactly, because it is confusing, and it's important that we bring everybody along.
Yeah.
Not just the provincial government, but also our friends in First Nations.
Yeah, well, it does follow that protocol. I really think it's important that we do that. Engaging as First Nations, especially, because I'm sure there's some concern in some areas there of what Métis will look like to them in the future, right? But I do believe we're Indigenous people and we should practice some protocol in the right way, the steps of doing that.
Absolutely.
But they should be informed. I know some of them do have a connection to the Métis community too through their families, right? So I think it's just important to acknowledge that protocol.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, for the people just overall, and when you look at the Indigenous nations within Canada and Alberta, there's the conversation about the Indian Act constantly comes out of, how it's outdated, et cetera. But you see different nations and bands that are negotiating with the government right now on self-government.
Yeah.
So it's interesting is the kind of, if you want to call it a workaround of getting away with some of the Indian Act, is self-government. So you're able to do the right things for your people. And we're very fortunate because that's our first step.
Yeah.
We're not having to deal with that particular issue right now. And we're starting off as a self-government agreement, which alleviates a lot of the barriers within the Indian Act.
It's with Canada. It's not like the treaties are based with the Crown relationship. Our relationship is with Canada, who are, I guess you would say, representatives of the Crown, but we're not directly dealing with, the King of England or anything like that, right?
Yeah, it's a different dynamic, and it's so complicated to actually explain because, I said most of the population, when they look at it, they really don't understand, the Indian Act and self-government and what does this mean and how are they different, and it is very complex, and it's complex because we've had to deal with a problem that generally is being refused to get fixed.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know if there's a diplomatic way of saying it, but everybody agrees that it's broken, but no one's agreeing to fix it.
Yeah, actually you're right. But, I want to thank you for being here today. And I do believe maybe we get you back on here eventually again. I know that it's not gone to Parliament yet. Neither it's not being first, second, or third readings have been done yet. But I anticipate it will be done in this new year, probably in a month from now. So hopefully we get in there and we can have a deeper discussion about even that legislative process.
Yeah, I'm actually, that'd be a great idea. Is once we have the rules and you vote on it, that's a great time because a lot of people that are interested in running in this, in the new government will want to know this.
Yeah. But no, I want to thank you for everything, the update. I know you guys are just getting started with that transition, or at least a month anyways, but certainly updating our members I think is very, very important. So with that, I want to thank Devin for another creating a nice atmosphere again. Nice wood paneling and the soundproofing, but he didn't put that up. Petroleum Club did. But no, I want to thank everybody and hit subscribe. We are on Spotify. We're on iTunes if you want to just listen to audio only, or just have a listen on YouTube and you can actually see our faces. But I want to thank everybody for coming or viewing today and look forward to the future.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta.